Hello and good afternoon. I am going to talk to you about global warming once again. And I think it was 2008, there's like 30,000 scientists that were planning to sue Al Gore about global warming. Well, I'm going to get on with this here. I still believe that global warming is happening and it's in effect. Right now I'm going to talk about the ocean. Before I talked about the concept of catalyst and global warming. Now I'm going to talk about what's happening with the ocean. Okay, we know that the temperature, global temperature, surface temperature has went up 1 degree in the last 100 years, and it is still rising. Okay, and they say they're not concerned about this little bit of glacial melt. Well, they don't understand something. Each time a piece of that glacier breaks off, and there's no snow cover on it, there's no reflection of the sun's. It reflects the sun's heat. Is what the snow does. Now, if there is no snow cover on these glaciers, it is going to get affected by the warmth of the sun, and that will itself increase more glacial melting. Now, they say that it's insignificant, the amount of ice that's breaking off and falling into the ocean, that it really ain't going to raise ocean temperatures that much. But by the North Carolina shoreline, they've noticed a 4.5 foot raise in the last 100 years. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot. And we got to take into consideration a few other things that I've learned about. Thermal expansion. That has to do with the fact there's no snow on top of the glaciers. That expands the heat on those glaciers and causes it to melt, accelerating the rate of melt. Which I told you before about catalysts. When you affect one physical aspect of something, you change the chemical outcome. You change the physical aspect of that thing when you affect it with a catalyst. So there's no snow on there, no snow to protect it from melting, you get a little more melting. So it might be just a little bit here and there, and you get a little bit of water rising in the ocean. And I really consider this fact. They say that it will take 80 to 100 years for there to be a significant rise in the ocean to cause any type of effect. But they're forgetting once again, all you 30,000 scientists out there that want to sue this guy, Al Gore, you need to put your head in the sand, because you're going to find out here shortly that he was correct on a lot of things. And you can hate him or dislike him, it doesn't matter to me whatsoever. I'm debating facts. The fact is, your data will be insignificant, because I told you the factor called a thing called catalyst. And the ocean has been warming up. Water levels have been rising. We see all this flooding in Australia. We see these low-lying islands starting to get covered with water. So that suggests that ocean levels are rising. And when you got to understand another thing, when that ice melts in those glaciers, water gets underneath it. It causes a sliding effect and draws the glaciers closer to the ocean. It's drawing it into warmer water little by little, so that there is melt water underneath that's lubricating and sliding these glaciers. Remember when the glaciers cut through the world at one time? Who's to say they can't do it again? Okay, like history repeats itself. Okay, well, let me keep going here. I'm not going to keep rambling on, but I'm getting on with more facts. So now we got the ocean rising. It may be insignificant at the moment, but the more you add to the catalyst, if the temperature does raise 1 more degree in this century, which I think it's gonna considerably raise a little bit more than that, a little bit quicker than what we expect, because everything is escalating at an exponential rate because of the effects we're having on our environment. The more you add to the water, it's just like a landfill. The more trash you add to it, the more it mounts up and piles up. Same with all these other aspects that you're putting into the environment. It's going to add up all the chemical, reactions, all the things that you're causing on this earth is going to cause these things to happen. There's going to be a reaction to it. Now, if you're a scientist that has a rational mind and is not one-sided on looking at the issues of everything, you got to look at every underlying factor. It's obvious that the ocean is warming up. It's obvious it may be insignificant at the moment, this little bit of water that's added to the ocean. But from my understanding, it only has to rise like a foot or two to really have any damage. Okay? What else did I get written here? Oh, the glacial mass balance. That's going to be significant too. Like I told you with the snow. If the snow's not there to reflect the sun's heat or the radiation that comes off the sun, like the ultraviolet rays and stuff like that, it comes down there and melts things because of the heat. And this, like I said, this water underneath is flowing. These glaciers are no longer completely solid. At one time, underneath where the water is flowing underneath the glaciers right now, and it's causing the sliding effect. At one time, that wasn't happening. Here's another factor considered into being a catalyst. You scientists have to really work on that word catalyst, because you can't just go on this data trip all the time. You got to look at every underlying factor. This is how you know what's going to happen. Projection. It's like anticipation. You make a projection, but you make a projection on a very noticeable perception. You can't just look at it and calculate one or two things. You got to put all the things into the mix. When you make a specific formula to find out something, right? You got to understand what is the effect of that outcome of that formula have on its effect on other things surrounding it. Okay? You can't just write one formula or one mathematical pattern to examine something that has many different aspects. Okay? I know I'm getting off on a tangent here because it upsets me. I thought people were smarter than this, especially in the science community. Come on, 30,000 people are debating whether global warming is actually happening. Scientists know that the Earth is warming up, period. But to what degree is the question that they all have. And I'm giving you part of the answer, the part of the key or the clue that's missing to the riddle of this whole rhyme about global warming. Every time something affects weather, it is a very part of the whole. You can't just look at one thing. I keep rambling on about this whole thing. You got to look at the whole picture. You can look at the picture and say, "Oh, I see an island, or I see a tree, or I see water, whatever." When you look at the whole picture, you look at all the individual working parts, just like an engine. Okay, an engine has all these individual working parts. And one of these parts fail. Okay? If you don't know the makeup of the engine, and you don't know what makes it tick, right? You can't fix it. Or you can't give an explanation on why it's not working. That's the same way with this whole concept of global warming. You got to look at all these small individual parts to it. I'm going off on a tangent again, but I can't help it. My mind's working. And we know that over time, these things are escalating. Even if they were a trend, you understand? Even if they were a trend, we're causing these trends to escalate. We're escalating global warming. We're escalating the rise in water. We're escalating a lot of damaging facts on environment. And you want facts? They're out there. They were saying, 3 meters in the last 16 years? They were saying it was like 16. What I got here? I believe it was 3 millimeters. 3 millimeters per year. Okay, it was estimated. But see, now this is a long-term projection. You got to understand what's going to happen in the next 10 or 15 years. Are there going to be other factors that are going to increase this global warming, cause the ocean to rise? The ocean is rising. They really can't give a really good projection. But I got this from some legitimate people on the internet. The Science Academy, what's it called? Oh, the National Science Academy, they've even made a prediction that the ocean waters are going to rise. So it's going to rise. But that's just a projection. That's just the data they have on just what the outcome they think is going to happen. They're not taking into consideration any other factors that are going to affect it, cause it to escalate or accelerate. Acceleration, there's another good word for you scientists. Acceleration rate. We got to understand, when you look at the other factors, you got to apply all the other factors in and then add the acceleration rate. When they're all working together to cause this warming, they're causing acceleration. So your time variable, your projection, your 100-year projection, your 1,000-year projection can be slightly off quite considerably because you didn't put into work the fact that all these other factors, these catalysts I call them, can change over time. Just like I was telling in my other video, in 25,000 years, the temperature only rose 36 degrees. But in the last 100 years, it's rose 1 degree. If it rises, even if we're not around when this happens, 100 years from now, we could be damaging our next generation of people because we're neglecting to take care of the damage now. Take care of it now. Because, like I told you, it may be irreparable. You might not be able to change it. And they have satellite projecting ocean temperature. They're projecting the depth of the ocean, and they are all stating that it is rising. Some say more than others. Some projected it be more than others. But it doesn't matter. The fact is, it is rising. And if these things fall into place like I think they're going to, and escalate the warming effect, and more glaciers melt, and it's gonna speed up. I told you about the water underneath, the fresh water underneath it is just breaking up, and not to mention, I don't even get into this part, the conveyor. You put large amounts of fresh water into salt water, and it follows that conveyor, and it sweeps the bottom of that conveyor and takes that salt and sediment off the bottom that protects the flow of the conveyor. That conveyor stops. They said it could be a deep freeze or a real warm, weather around the world. Well, with the problem we have with global warming right now, we don't need that conveyor to stop. We would have mass areas that would have droughts on land. Even though the ocean be rising, we would have mass droughts in certain parts of land, in certain parts of the areas that are colder will be even colder. But the surface temperature of the world will probably pretty much remain the same. But you got to understand, we're screwing around with a lot of things in nature. We're screwing around a lot of things that are causing effects. Cause and effect, it's a big thing. That's another thing you scientists got to take into consideration. Cause and effect. The outcome, you'll see it with the cause and effect. You got to watch things. Put your ducks in a row and see what's really happening. Okay, just like I told you about the motor. If a motor is not working incorrectly and you have no knowledge of how the motor works or what the parts are in the motor or the engine or how to even get into it, you can't fix the problem, or you can't even analyze what the problem is without all these facts. So I'm giving you that metaphor. So open up your eyes, scientists. You 30,000 scientists that wanted to sue Al Gore, I suggest you go back to science school, and not only go back to science school, you got to research things with your own intellect, not sucking in what everybody tells you what is and what isn't. You find out for yourself, because that's how science came about, because men looked into things. They were intrigued, and then when they looked into it and they examined it, and all of a sudden they had a eureka moment, and that's how science came about. People started using their minds. They're not controlled by books. Okay, books are good. They give you information, but using your own brain and your own intellect to find things, that's how things are found. Most great findings are found by accident because someone's screwing around with something. Go, oh my gosh, look at this. That's how it's found. Okay, now I've rambled on, but I'm telling you, the ocean levels are rising, the Earth's temperature is rising, and be prepared for things to happen. See you later.